Today's episode is sponsored by civic engagement podcast Future Hindsight, who are back with an all-new season on systemic racism in the U.S. Each week, they'll explore how the legacy of slavery still permeates our country and how we can rectify it. This week, they're taking a look at racial bias in organized labor and the shocking wage gap felt by women and people of color. Listen to Future Hindsight wherever you get your podcasts. Now, for this show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, New York Times cybersecurity reporter Nicole Perlroth. In her book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends, the Cyberweapons Arms Race. Also on the program today, yesterday was day one of impeachment, and Trump's lawyers made the case that Trump can't hire good lawyers. And today, as the trial will continue, day two of impeachment, House managers will show security cam footage to drive home the costs of Trump's incitement. Meanwhile, COVID infections down, but mutant COVID looms. As data shows, bans on evictions are curbing COVID spread. Joe Biden signals his support for the House COVID checks threshold, meaning those checks are going to go to the same people as they did last time. 11.5 million workers face unemployment insurance cliff starting in 4 weeks. So the Democrats got to get busy. Chicago strikes a deal with teachers to finally give them COVID protections that they needed on day one. CENTCOM says it will continue to help the Saudis and hope they don't kill too many Yemeni civilians. In the wake of a coup in Myanmar, police fire into protests, and the U.S. announces it will not drop its case seeking extradition of Julian Assange from the U.K. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. It is day two of the impeachment hearings. Those hearings start in a little bit from now. And in day one, of course, they had essentially one vote. And that vote was whether a former president can be impeached. And that vote turned out, it wasn't there was a little bit of a surprise, wasn't there? Emma Vigeland, who is joining me today, as always.
You got my name right. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I nailed it. Nailed it.
How are you today, Sam?
I am well. There was one surprise, right? Like we knew based upon a vote that took place, I guess it was a week and a half ago now. Time has flattened for me. Rand Paul basically introduced a motion to summarily dismiss the case because ostensibly there was no constitutional grounding for impeaching a former president. At that time, 5 Republicans voted against Rand Paul. All you really didn't need any, right? It's 51 vote. The vice president could have voted. This time, they basically took the same vote, but it was 56. Or I should say there was one more Republican who voted in favor of the idea that it's constitutional to try a president who's been impeached.
Yeah, and
or a former president.
Well, it was Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, and his reasoning was basically Trump's lawyers are so bad that they're forcing me to vote that this is a legitimate constitutional trial. Doubt he will actually vote to convict, but that's just a little preview of how horrific Trump's lawyers' performances were yesterday.
It was stunning, to say the least. And on some level, not surprising. I mean, he fired his first set of lawyers a couple of weeks ago. And then, everybody's been in this predicament, right? Like, you've got maybe your tub is backed up. And so you call a plumber, but the plumber calls and says, I've got mono. I've got mononuclear. I can't come.
Right.
Do you know another plumber? I don't really. Well, I'm going to call my cousin and see. And they just go, oh yeah, no, I've done some plumbing. And then they come over and that's what happens.
Well, I mean, one of the people on this team was a personal injury attorney who has sued him in the past year. So that's just the kind of folk that Trump had to resort to.
Team of rivals. Exactly. But here, so look, there's a lot of footage we could show you, and we're going to play that clip from Cassidy later, but there's a lot of footage I could show you to explicate just how bad Trump's, never mind the case in and of itself, which I think is a pretty weak case, but just how bad his attorneys are. But we've settled on two. And the first one, they're both from Sean Hannity's show. And Sean Hannity is interviewing one of the attorneys on the team. Not the worst one. Although that attorney seems to be like they're almost like in a race to see who can do a worse job. They are talking about Bruce Castor. And Hannity is begging this guy to fire Bruce Castor because of how poorly he did. Here's Sean Hannity with David Schoen.
To drain the swamp, whatever they call it on his side, to make a difference in this country. That's what political speech is about.
There's a lot of criticism of the opening, not your part in particular, but it seemed to be free associating, extemporaneous, somewhat meandering. Will the rest of this process, because you're going to be out, as I understand it, Friday and Saturday, will this be more focused and will it be more prepared? And are there other people that are planning to make those arguments? Because some conservatives called me and said, whoa, we need somebody harder hitting here.
Well, the fellow who you say did the opening today has his law firm there. There seem to be very capable people. I'm sure today he hadn't planned on going. And so I'm sure that they'll be very well prepared in the future and do a great job in the case. There's a lot to say, and I know they feel very strongly about fighting against what they're seeing.
All right, David, good job today. Thank you so much.
I'll tell you something. First off, he doesn't even say his name, like as if to be honest with you, I wasn't even familiar with him.
Yeah.
Did they just admit that their lawyer didn't realize that he was going to be speaking today? That doesn't seem like they've prepped very well. It really does have that sense of like, I know a guy, he's not quite licensed, but he could come over and fix your
he does a little bit of everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's plumbing, right? Yeah, well, I mean, he does electrical sometimes, but I'm sure how different can it be?
It's all stuff within the walls.
So that gives you a sense of just how bad everybody, and what they're trying to do, of course, is set this up of like, oh, it's not Trump's fault. Trump has a great case. It's just they don't have a good lawyer. But then watch what the good lawyer, David Schoen, does afterwards. Remember, the case is, did what Donald Trump say incite his supporters? Right? That's the case. And here is David Schoen maybe accidentally making the case that, yes, he did.
Have to say they deserve impeachment.
Yeah, I would say if listen, if they tried to impeach them, I would say that also was an abuse of the impeachment process. But your point is they're using rhetoric that's just as inflammatory or more so.
I'm sorry. The point here is they are now trying to make the argument that Democrats have said just as inciting things as Donald Trump did in that speech leading people in. So here.
Was an abuse of the impeachment process. But your point is they're using rhetoric that's just as inflammatory or more so. The problem is they don't really have followers. They're dedicated followers. And so, when they give their speeches. But this speech, I think right now you really are finding out about the pre-planning. And I'm afraid they're going to back off that investigation because maybe, so many people want to tie it to Donald Trump. There's nothing they showed today that in any way ties this to Donald Trump. It's just a silly argument. It's not tied to Donald Trump.
Okay. Now, did you catch what he said there? Democrats have said the exact same thing. It's just the problem is they don't have those type of dedicated followers.
They don't lead a cult of personality, and that's on them.
But what does he mean by the problem? What he means by the problem is their failure to incite their followers to go commit an act of violence like this is because they haven't really done the work and laid the ground to have the proper followers. When he says the problem, he is saying the reason why other people haven't done this. And what is the this? The this is incite other people to violence. Look, the bottom line is I can take a match and I can drop it in a bucket of water and nothing happens. But if I take a match and I decide to drop it in a bucket of kerosene, and that's what Donald Trump did. For years, he has been basically filling that bucket with kerosene, creating the fumes. I know it's not a perfect analogy.
All right.
And he lit the match and threw it into that kerosene. He knew what he was doing. Everybody else did. And there's his attorney just basically admitting it.
Yeah, I mean, there's two prongs of what they're trying to argue, and they're doing it pretty poorly. One is that he didn't incite it, which his lawyer just admitted to, basically tacitly, on Sean Hannity's program. And the second is that you can't impeach him when he's not in office, which, as Jamie Raskin and the Democrats have pointed out, is patently absurd because it sets a precedent that a president can do whatever they want in January, do whatever they want in the final weeks of their presidency, and there are zero consequences. The case is insanely weak, but Trump will still get off because of the partisan nature of all of this.
That's true. But that first part that you're talking about in terms of whether he can be impeached has already been adjudicated essentially by this jury, and that was yesterday. And today it'll be interesting to see if we see Castor. I suspect we may not.
I mean, this might have been a plea to get him fired. Sean Hannity trying to communicate with him via the TV, as he so often tries to do.
It was reported that Donald Trump was rather unhappy with Castor's performance. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Nicole Perloff. She is New York Times cybersecurity reporter on her book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends. The Cyberweapons Arms Race. We'll be right back after this. Folks, we have some sponsors of today's show. As you know, I mean, for a lot of people, you've avoided to see the doctor with good reason. Avoided going to the dentist. There's a lot of different things that you've avoided because of COVID. Well, after a while, everybody, I would imagine, has something they should be seeing a doctor about. If making a doctor appointment seems like a chore or it's causing you anxiety, well, PlushCare is here for you. They make it super easy to schedule an appointment and see a doctor so you can prioritize your health hassle-free. PlushCare provides virtual doctor appointments through your smartphone or your computer. All you got to do is you pick a time that works for you. You book an appointment online. There's no waiting on hold, no sitting in a crowded waiting room, no travel. With PlushCare, you can be diagnosed, treated, and even have a prescription sent to your pharmacy of choice within minutes. PlushCare accepts most major insurance carriers. It's available in all 50 states. And if you're having difficulty managing your emotions, PlushCare has doctors available to help with that as well. I mean, look, there's nagging little things that you got going on, maybe things that you're a little worried about that you want to make sure aren't anything more serious. Telemedicine is a great option to deal with those things, deal with the anxieties you may be building because you haven't addressed them in any way. PlushCare makes it easier than ever to take care of yourself inside and out. You can start your membership today. You go to plushcare.com/majority. Start your free 30-day trial. That's PlushCare, PlushCare.com/majority for a 30-day trial. PlushCare.com/majority. Also, Valentine's Day is only days away now. And obviously, maybe a little bit tricky to have a special Valentine's Day. Well, I've got an idea for you. Now, I don't know if you can get it in time because we're only 4 days away, but nothing like showing I've done this many times where I get a gift and I've been a little bit late. So I print out a picture of what the gift looks like.
Classic.
Well, Hunt a Killer is the murder mystery subscription box that is the most exciting date night you can do at home. I think it's a great Valentine's Day gift. Hunt a Killer brings people together, challenges them to decode ciphers, examine evidence, solve puzzles. With each delivery, you'll sift through documents, evidence, audio recordings, and case files. You eliminate suspects, you identify murder weapons, you crack a case, you catch the killer. That's basically what you do. You can enjoy your favorite beverage during it. I mean, it's fun. You can also do it with socially distant friends. Plus, there's an online community where you can get all sorts of helps. It's a spoiler-free thing, so everybody knows not to tell who the killer is. But there's thousands of members. They help each other solve difficult puzzles. They talk about true crime. Also, part of the proceeds of every box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping with real-life cold cases. In my case, I've been playing with my kid. She's into these type of things. I don't know if she really knew that. She was just told me that she really likes Law and Order. And I was like, would you like to actually try and solve one? And she was super psyched. And it is amazing to have your kid be into anything that doesn't involve a screen, at least in my household.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good, I'll tell you why I think it's a good Valentine's thing is if your relationship a little bit rocky, you get into, this is like a mini commitment. It's like a trial run. Because, you can speed up your boxes. You can get them to send it to you quicker, but otherwise it's once a month.
Yeah, it's
right? And then you're basically locked in for 6 months.
It's a good idea.
It's like you're not going to leave a relationship when you have a case active.
That's right. It's like having, it's like, people stay together for the kids. Well, you get to stay together, you get to solve the case. I don't know. Matt, you've been doing it, right, for with your girlfriend?
Yeah, I've also been doing the Cadence Theater Hunt a Killer episode where you go over, they have, police documents and stuff like that. Like, what is the murder weapon? You have to email it with a secret code. So
it's I guess, 90-year cold case? 1930s? Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. Cool era.
Yeah. Well, it's also been fun, too, because you get, in this instance, teaching my kid a little bit about, not real history, but, some, I guess, an idea of what was going on at the time. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority. Use promo code majority for 20% off your first box. Again, make sure you use the code majority. You get 20% off discount. The question is, do you have what it takes to hunt a killer? All of our coupon codes and whatnot will be in the podcast and YouTube subscription. You can find it at there, obviously. Just a reminder, this program is supported in its large part, most part, 90, I don't know what the exact percentage is, 90, 92%, 95%. It changes month to month by our members. We can do this because of our members. If you want to join the show, support the free half, also get the first half commercial free, Go to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you support the free show, and we give you extra content every day. So check that out.
And like the stream.
Oh, and like the stream on YouTube. And also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 20% off. I got slammed on Twitter by a big name
skeptic.
Yeah, I don't know. He was upset that I was he was attempting to make I guess to mock me because I support Just Coffee, and it's been a boon.
Although I
for
saw
them.
other replies where it was like he said Sam's not the worst person on the internet, which I think is like the closest you're gonna get from him.
Did he?
Yeah.
You should blurb that.
I should.
Yeah.
I am not the worst person on the internet.
If you ever write a book, that's your next quote.
All right. Well, I'm going to that'll be my jacket cover. Speaking of books, I'd like to welcome to the program Nicole Perloff. She is the New York Times cybersecurity reporter and author of "This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends: The Cyberweapons Arms Race." Nicole is just about joining us via Zoom. Nicole, are you there? Almost, folks. This is
I'm here. Can you hear me?
we can
Can
hear
you see me?
Now we
can
can.
see you. You're sideways. That's odd.
Sideways. Okay. Better?
There you go. That's
Better.
great. Nicole, thanks for joining us. So this is obviously well timed, and we will get to this, but there was a fairly scary hack just the other day, or reported in Florida. We'll get to that. I want to put that in context, but let's just start with the title. This is how they tell me the world ends. Is it that serious?
Well, the title came because, when I started covering this 10 years ago, people were always warning me of a devastating cyber attack that was going to hit the grid or our water or railways. And I kept asking them, like, okay, so when is the attack going to happen? And they always had the same answer, which was 18 to 24 months. And now we're about 10 years past that point, and we haven't had that calamitous attack. But through my reporting, I've just realized we are inching very, very close to that. And the attack that you mentioned last Friday in Florida is a really good example of a very close call. So we're getting there. The book to make this my own left moment where I can really lay out what the vulnerabilities are, what the threats look like, and what it will take to lock up these systems.
All right. Well, let's start with this concept of 0 days or O days, I guess it is. What is that? Nicole, you there?
There you are. Okay. Sorry. Switched internet. Okay. I'm back.
Okay. So what is explain to us what this concept of 0 days or O days is.
So 0 day is just an undiscovered flaw in software that is not known to the software manufacturer. So, when you think about the software updates that you get to your phone, that means the software maker, let's just say Apple, is fixing some bugs that was found in its software, and it's rolling out a patch so that your phone is protected and your communications are protected. But in the hands of a hacker, those same bugs and flaws, and unknown to manufacturer 0 days, could be used for more nefarious things, like they could be used to spy on your communications, and there's a real government market for these 0 days.
And we should say 0 days refers to specifically how urgent a fix this is needed, right? I mean, I guess theoretically there are, problems you have with your software where it's like, we should get around to this because it's inconvenient for people, or we should get around to this because when you do this, it freezes up. But when we refer to something that's 0 days, it's something like this is crucial and urgent that we fix immediately because it has a massive vulnerability.
That's right. Usually the bugs that we call 0 days are pretty critical. They could be used for everything from espionage to surveillance to a more deadly attack if it's in an industrial control. So, it got its name because once discovered, people have had 0 hours to fix it. But I actually like to think of it more like patient zero in an epidemic. Like once you find that infected person, you need to come up with a vaccine, you need to immunize them, and you need to make sure you're immunizing everyone else so they're not infected by the virus. And that's essentially what a 0 day is in the digital world.
All right, so let's go back to when we started, or I should say in your sort of journey of understanding exactly how wide or big the vulnerabilities are and what the threats are. This was, it basically was Snowden's revelations. Is that right? Tell us, what did Snowden tell us and what did he not tell us in terms of what you ultimately found?
Well, I was brought into one of the Snowden projects and was given access to some of those leaks. And having covered cybersecurity for a few years before that, I'd always heard these murmurings of a gray market or a black market for 0 days. And so once I was glimpsing through the Snowden documents, if you looked at any of those documents, they were really vague. They were always out of context. They were PowerPoint slides or memos. But there were these vague references to pretty much a backdoor in every technology that you or I rely on for our daily lives. Everything from your iPhone and Android to firewalls, routers, switches. So there were references in the documents to commercial partners and their security partners and third parties that were providing them with some access to these backdoors. But the Snowden documents never explained that in any detail. And if you remember back to 2013, really the outrage was on things about the metadata collection program that the NSA was doing, and also the phone call, tracking people's phone calls and understanding who they were calling and when. But to me, the bigger revelation that seemed very unexplained and sort of intangible and hard for people to understand was the fact that, okay, we know that the government probes software, okay? We know that they use this for espionage. We know because there was a crazy masterpiece of an attack that the US pulled off with Israel against Iran back in 2007, where they took out their uranium centrifuges with code. We know that these have real battlefield implications. And what I wanted to know is there a market for these tools? Is the government paying hackers for these 0 days? And what is the moral hazard there? If it used to be that we spied on Russian technology and they spied on American technology, but now we're all using Windows, iPhones, and Android phones. So if the government finds a 0 day in Android software and they decide to keep it because they want to spy on terrorists or our adversaries abroad, that entails a trade-off, which means leaving Americans more insecure. And the reason that the stakes are getting higher there is that other governments, after that attack that we pulled off in Iran, their eyes have been opened to the potential of a 0 day, both for espionage and for destruction. And so they're all looking and hoarding these same vulnerabilities. And in the end, it sort of leaves all of us less safe. And then there's another caveat here, which is we're rolling all of that vulnerable software into our critical infrastructure, into our water treatment facilities, into our power plants, into transportation, into airplanes, into fighter jets. So there's no slowing that down. We're just at the beginning of our virtualization with AI and everything. So I wanted to have this conversation now to say, do we really want to be leaving all of these systems and software more vulnerable so that we can preserve our espionage advantage? Or do we want to stop and say, it's time to lock up these systems?
Okay, and the Iran attack you were talking about is Stuxnet, and I want to circle back to that. But this concept of the market and how it developed is fascinating to me. So, like, walk us through the sort of the mechanics of it. The national security apparatus. I mean, I guess this starts even decades ago, and to some extent, right? But where did the first market come from? Was it coming from Microsoft saying like, hey, there's some, quasi black hat hackers out there, and maybe we can have them inside the tent pissing out as opposed to outside the tent pissing in, as they say, right? To make sure that we're not subject to their vulnerability. So we're going to seek these people out, and that mutated into, we're going to throw a bunch of cash out there and see what it attracts? I mean, how did it develop?
So it's a little bit different, and it's really interesting. I quote the Lonesome Dove in the book where it says, I think we spent our best years fighting on the wrong side, because in the 90s and even in the early 2000s, when hackers, and I use the term hacker loosely, but it's basically just someone it could be a good guy, a bad guy, a curious guy who's probing the software. So when hackers would find bugs and vulnerabilities in, let's just pick on Microsoft for a minute, in Microsoft's code, they would call up Microsoft in the 90s and they'd say, I just used your code to get into NASA. You need to fix this. And back then, Microsoft was so focused on getting its products out. The Facebook motto of move quickly and break things was very much alive at these tech companies back then, especially when Microsoft missed the boat on the internet and had to try and catch up to Netscape. And there's some interesting history there. But they were just trying to get these products to market so quickly. And there were so many bugs and security problems in the code. And hackers tried to let them know. And Microsoft's response, and a lot of companies' response in those days, was stop probing our products and leave us alone. Don't call back. And what I learned was over that exact same period, defense contractors working on behalf of U.S. intelligence agencies saw real intelligence potential and espionage potential in the bugs that these same hackers were finding. And as they're getting sort of threatened and bopped over the head by the Microsofts of the world, they were getting called up and recruited by these defense contractors and paid as much as $150,000 for 1 0-day to basically give it to the US government and not tell a soul about it so that they could use it for espionage. And so I met with one of the first 0-day brokers who said, originally they were searching for these 0 days on their own, writing the code to exploit them and selling them to other defense contractors or the Pentagon or other law enforcement and intelligence agencies. But then they realized, why spend all our time looking for these bugs when hackers all over the world are already looking for them? Why don't we pay them for the raw material, the 0 days? We'll write the code to exploit it and we'll sell that to the US government and it'll save us a ton of time. And so this really interesting market was born where we were sending middlemen. And, by the way, these are secret vulnerabilities in code. We didn't want to leave any trace of these transactions or have these vulnerabilities get out. So, back in those days, some of these payments were made in Western Union payments, but most of them were done in cash. So I would hear these crazy stories from those days where these defense contractors would essentially send middlemen over to Europe. And a lot of the best hackers in those days were in Eastern Europe because they have such a great science and math education program, but they didn't have the same job opportunities we had here. So they'd go over there with a duffel bag full of cash and essentially pay these hackers for their 0 days, bring them back to the Beltway. They would weaponize them and sell them to US government agencies. And that went on for a long time and it still happens today. Now, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, how on book are these things? How documented were they, or how obscured were they? Everything's obscured by national intelligence agencies, but relative to what you've studied, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's very much obscured. In those days, it was we're talking about cash transactions. So literally no record. And that was really hard to go back and report. And it entailed going and finding one of the first brokers to walk me through this. It entailed finding hackers who were getting paid in those days, and even one of the middlemen who would go back and forth. But then what happened was, back then it was sign this non-disclosure agreement. But then these programs really became critical to US cyber offensive warfare and espionage programs. So they became classified. So when I went back and tried to find contracts over the last few years, usually what happens is you see the contractor's name and then you see these payments made in the millions of dollars. And it's the description is, we paid them for software. And technically that's true. This is just software. These are code to exploit bugs in critical systems and widely used software. But the problem is no one is going to see that contract and think, oh, this is for a 0 day that's going to leave all of us vulnerable. The US government was just paying this company for software. And so I found a lot of these contracts at the Air Force, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, the usual suspects that would use this for law enforcement, and also some battlefield operations. But I was not able to track down any of these contracts through the NSA or the CIA. And I was told that's because those deals happen through special contract vehicles and are classified. So that's sort of where the trail ended.
So, what you're describing in terms of like the essentially the subcontractors who are sort of finding these vulnerabilities, the contractors who sort of almost like take it from the gray market and sort of almost whitewash it into the system, as it were, and then get it into our national security state. I mean, I've heard stories in terms of arms dealing that is almost identical to this, where
that's what it is. Mm-hmm. It's the cyber arms race. It is the digital equivalent, but it's all done in code, which makes it much harder to trace and much harder for the public to understand the trade-offs.
And it seems to me that you are also it's harder to it's less explicit in the real world, as it were, and the danger of the market that you're creating is exponential, because I can go out and have subcontractors looking for, handguns in Bulgaria that I want to ship to Afghanistan, but I don't have, and I've got to do that. But somewhere there's got to be a factory to make those. If I'm flooding money into this market, all I really need is someone who's a good coder, and they need cash, and there's almost like an infinite number of those people throughout the world. So you're actually like, you're building a market that's greater than and less limited than it takes to sort of manufacture handguns.
That's right. And, I quote the first broker I found, as saying, anyone with $2,000 for a laptop is in this game. And, these, just like you said, these are digital munitions. They really are, in a lot of cases, when you think about the potential to wipe out a hospital's data, wipe out patient records. I mean, we are already seeing these attacks all the time on American hospitals. I just covered an attack on a hospital in Vermont where they wiped out the chemo protocols. So patients who were coming in to get their chemotherapy, they had no way to know what they'd already been given and how to come up with their protocol, and they're turning patients away. So the problem is, like, these threats are no longer a theoretical for Americans. Like, every day we are seeing ransomware attacks on our hospitals, on our cities, on companies. We're seeing the Russian attack right now unfold on government IT networks. We are the most vulnerable and targeted country in the planet, even if we're the most advanced in terms of our cyber offensive capabilities in the world. And so that is the thing I wanted people to understand. We can be really good at hacking. We can keep trying to outsmart the enemy. We can keep thinking we're the only ones who know how to use these 0 days to our advantage. But it's really important for people to understand that the trade-off that's made in those programs is at the expense of defense. And every calorie we expend on buying a 0 day, exploiting a 0 day, hoarding a 0 day is a calorie we're taking away from locking down our code, locking down our systems, and making sure Americans are safe.
I want to return to that sort of the dynamic, and really, I guess the one of the crucial questions is it too late to really sort of like, at one point you unleash you create this market, and it then becomes self-sustaining, right? Like you hire enough mercenaries, at one point somebody's going to hire them just to have a war amongst themselves on some level. Right. But let's go to Stuxnet, because this was sort of this was the sort of like, I guess, the archetype example of what is problematic about this. Will you just walk people, because I don't know if people really have as much of an awareness of what Stuxnet was, and certainly, it was 15 years ago almost now. So I think people have forgotten what this was about, why it was unleashed, and what the problems have been that have sort of rippled through the past 15 years.
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's almost become my party trick back when we used to go to parties. be like, have you heard of Stuxnet? And people go, no. And I was like, okay, listen to this, get this. So essentially what happened was, you have to really kind of put it in a little bit of context, which was around 2006, 2007, Israel was putting more pressure on the George W. Bush administration to give them the bunker buster bombs that they needed to basically take out Natanz nuclear facility in Iran. They were really worried about Iran's uranium enrichment facilities. At the same time, the United States was completely bogged down in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We were seeing soldier death counts climb. And the last thing the George W. Bush administration wanted to do in his second term was trigger World War III and get into a war with Iran. So there was a lot of back and forth between his administration and the Israelis. And eventually the NSA came up with what they called their third option, which was coming up with a computer attack, a worm essentially, that could get into the Natanz uranium centrifuges and spin the rotors at speeds. Now, in some cases, they pulled this off. They would spin the rotors at a speed that was too fast, so it would essentially destroy the centrifuge. In other cases, they would slow it down. And they did this brilliantly. They did it over time. They would speed it up and then they would just sit back for a couple of weeks. Or they would slow it down just to a trickle and then sit back for a couple of weeks. And all the while, when the engineers at Natanz were looking at their computer screens, everything was showing that it was functioning normally, almost like this Ocean's 11 or Mission Impossible, taking over the screen to show everything being totally normal, but in the background, they're completely destroying their uranium. So we pulled off that attack, and there is, credit where credit is due. That attack was a crazy success. I mean, it kept the Israeli jets on the ground. It headed off World War III, and it set Iran's nuclear ambitions back years, because eventually, when all was said and done, we destroyed about 1,000 of their centrifuges. Some even argue that it brought Iran to the negotiating table when it came time for the Iranian nuclear arms talks. So that all happened. The problem was it got out. So we don't know how, but somehow that worm escaped. And around 2010, security researchers and firms like Symantec all over the world started picking up the Stuxnet code on their client systems, dissecting it, and eventually it came out that this was from an attack on Iran's nuclear facility. When that happened, everything changed. Every government on earth with any kind of resources at their disposal and any worry about, terrorism, activism, adversaries, realized what they were missing out on. They saw the potential of code to sow destruction and the espionage potential of code. So since 2010, over the last decade, we have seen a cyber arms race where other governments, and really our adversaries, I mean, one of the governments that really kickstarted their offensive cyber programs into action after Stuxnet was Iran. They now boast one of the 5th biggest cyber armies in the world. Now, there's no way to verify that that's actually true, but certainly we are now seeing more attacks on U.S. targets from Iran than almost any other nation state hacking group on earth. And that is the long tail of Stuxnet. We really showed the world what was possible, and that fueled this market for 0 days among countries all over the planet. And one of the things I learned in my book was there is a very healthy supply side market for 0 days in Argentina. They, for whatever reason, they didn't have access to the same technologies we had here in the United States. They have a great science and computer technology education there, and the economy wasn't doing so well. And so hackers there learned that they could make quite a lot of money finding 0 days, exploiting them, and selling those exploits to governments. So for the book, I went down to Buenos Aires. I went to a hacking convention there, and I met with some of the people who sell these exploits to governments. And I asked one of them, will you only sell these to Western governments, like good Western governments? And the guy just wanted to smack me. He was like, Nicole, down in Argentina, we don't think of the United States as a good Western government. Last time I checked, the country that bombed another country into oblivion wasn't Iran or China. We will sell to whoever gives us the biggest bag of cash. And that was really a wake-up call for me to understand that the market that the US spawned for 0 days has gotten so far beyond our control. This is happening all over the world. And that's why I think right now is a really good time to have the conversation about whether we should be finding and hoarding 0 days instead of getting them patched and fixed and rolled out.
That dynamic that you express, right? The essentially us launching an arms race that our own delusion of exceptionalism, I would argue, which allowed it to be like, oh, well, I mean, we have the moral high ground here, of course, or we're considered, I mean, it is doubly problematic because A, we don't have the moral high ground as far as the vast majority of the world considers. And B, this is not, again, a situation where the bar to entry is, so high that only a superpower could really manage this. Like you said earlier, all you need is a laptop and a smart person.
Right, exactly.
All around the world. And once you lose those two sort of like prohibitions, I guess, or obstacles to getting into that market, we're toast ultimately, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And, it's almost like we've carried this Cold War mentality too long. Like we're just up against Russia or one adversary. And as long as we outsmart them by finding the 0 days, by exploiting them in clever, stealthy ways, we'll be okay. But that's just not true anymore. We have cyber criminals hitting our hospitals all the time. We have, ransomware attacks have just gone insane. Our elections have been targeted. Our critical infrastructure has been targeted. We had a hacker try and get into a water treatment facility and up the levels of lye, the chemical in the water. This is not a theoretical. We may have been the most advanced player in cyber for decades. We are now losing our lead. The gap is closing between what we can do and what these other countries and private citizens can do. And so it's really time to think about how do we start really seriously protecting ourselves.
Part of this, too, is also just the nature, I would say, of these agencies where it's always offensive, go, 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 as opposed to, hold on, we take a step back, maybe stop contracting and hoarding all of these vulnerabilities and potentially just start to build up and fortify our own defenses. I mean, is that kind of the dynamic that you're seeing as well?
Yes, we always asked, can we do this? Sure we can, but we never asked, should we be doing this? And, to be fair to the NSA and the intelligence agencies, they did come up with a process for deciding whether to keep or turn over these vulnerabilities during the George Bush administration. So originally this was boiled down to an acronym that is essentially American exceptionalism in acronym form, which was called NOBUS at the NSA, and it stood for nobody but us. If they found a vulnerability or a 0 day that they thought only they could be clever enough to exploit, they kept it. If they thought someone else might exploit it, they turned it over to the technology companies. And that sort of calculation became more formalized under Bush and under Obama. The problem is, a couple of years ago, someone, we don't even know who it was, but someone who called themselves the shadow brokers, hacked the NSA, dumped their 0 day exploits online. And once we took a look at what the NSA was hoarding, we found that they were hoarding things like a Microsoft Windows vulnerability for 5 years. And once that was dumped online, North Korea picked it up for ransomware attacks. Russia picked it up in an attack on Ukraine that leaked out and hit Pfizer. It hit Merck, where Merck had to basically tap into the CDC's emergency vaccine supplies to supply vaccines that year. It cost FedEx $400 million. It had real blowback for American companies. And imagine if something like that happened right now to Pfizer and to Pfizer's vaccine supply. Like, we really cannot be hoarding a vulnerability in something like Microsoft Windows, which is used by everyone, whether you know it or not, for 5 years, just to preserve our espionage advantage. You need to be thinking about turning those over so we can get them fixed so we don't see that kind of collateral destruction.
I have one more question to sort of build on that, and then I want to come around to sort of like this, the sort of catalog these threats a little bit more. When you say we do this, and when we talk about like the NSA, I'm aware that in having talked to folks who are who are former prosecutors, that on some level, some of what motivates their prosecutions is an awareness that they're building a market. If we go after these high financiers, individuals, in 5 years, 10 years, I'm going to be defending them. And I'm going to be building a market, and I'm going to be defending these people. I'm going to make a lot of money. And the level of consciousness is, maybe not that explicit, but that's over the course of 4 or 5 years. You're working in there. There's certain incentives. How much of what's going on now, when we talk about when we talk about the security apparatus, which is so dominated by contractors anyways, who are actually private actors on some level, how much of it is like, hey, we can find these these exploits here, and I'm turning it up. I mean, it's the old, sort of like, story about the one lawyer who goes to a small town, has no business until some other lawyer moves in there, and all of a sudden business is booming. Like, how much of it is a function of all the incentive structures being in there? Like, the more exploits we find, the more I'm going to be needed because I'm the guy who's going to come in and fix it.
It's such a good question. I did not know that about prosecutors. That's disturbing. I'd never heard that level of consciousness before. But listen, I mean, the people who, first of all, let me mention that this market is unregulated. And the reason it's unregulated is because governments aren't regulators in it. They're the clients. They don't have any incentive to regulate a market in code that they themselves benefit from, period. Defense is hard. It is really hard. But the people who have been most outspoken about not setting norms for whether we turn over vulnerabilities, for not setting norms about who that code gets shared with, about whether they can train foreign governments in finding zero-day exploits, are the very people that profit off of these trainings and zero-day sales. And that's the way it's been for the last decade. Those are the people that have been on Twitter the last 24 hours since my book's out, calling the book wrong and saying, this is all a lie. We shouldn't be regulating this. There's a reason, because in the book, I basically out them as mercenaries. I out the fact that they have been training people like Erdogan's military to find zero-day exploits that inevitably Erdogan is going to use on its own people. Right. And we need, Turkey is a NATO ally. Okay. They are an American ally. So is the United Arab Emirates, where I learned former NSA hackers were being recruited to hack Qatar on behalf of the United Arab Emirates. Qatar is an American ally. And who got caught up in that dragnet? Michelle Obama's emails while she was in office communicating with the Sheikah in Qatar. So there needs to be some discussions about norms for the zero-day market and deciding who are we going to train? Are we going to train governments that we see come to Washington and beat up people on the lawn? Are we going to train those people in these capabilities? Are we going to sell them zero-day exploits? Like, that would be a useful discussion to have, and until now, we've really let the people who have the most incentive to see this market unregulated lead these discussions. And that's why I wrote this book. I wanted it to be really accessible to the average American so they can understand what is actually happening here and who the losers are, which is essentially all of us.
All right. So let me ask you this. I mean, there's a couple of questions sort of balled up in this, right? Which is, in part embedded in your title. I mean, there's, on one hand, I have this feeling of like, how have we gotten this far in time without it being a much bigger, like having been a much bigger attack, but also simultaneously, like, you hear these things like, okay, Oldsmar, Florida. Like, I've never even heard of this place. Like, why there? Why chemo in Vermont? Like, what is going, like, is there a sense amongst these people, like, if we do a little hit there and there, like I'm going to rob a couple of small community banks. And that way the FBI doesn't come after me. Like I'm just trying to come up with some type of metaphor. But if I go after Fort Knox, then I'm in big trouble. Like,
right.
What's going on? Is it that coordinated, or is it just like, are there people just sort of like testing vulnerabilities, or is there like 5 different stories that are happening simultaneously? And some of it is, we're just lucky, or, I mean, what is the dynamic here at play in terms of the threat as its potential and as it's being carried out?
So these are really targets of opportunity. I mean, just mechanically, let me just say what actually happens here in the case of the Vermont hospital, for instance. Cyber criminals, many of them in Eastern Europe, some in Russia, will scan around to look for open ports, open systems, people who haven't plugged up their software, who are using old software. And they'll scan around, and when they find one, they'll take a foothold into that system. Then they'll sell that foothold to other cyber criminals. There's a very sophisticated Eastern European, Russian economy for access to vulnerable systems. So they'll sell their access to another actor. And maybe this other actor is a ransomware group. And they'll pay a subscription fee essentially to drop ransomware into these vulnerable systems that this other group is maintaining a foothold into. And so it's very much a target of opportunity. It's just scanning the world, seeing who's vulnerable, locking them up with ransomware, demanding a ransom and millions of dollars, and then taking that money and continuing on their merry way. Now, in the case of the water treatment facility in Oldsmar, Florida, it's a little bit different. You're right. I had never heard of Oldsmar, Florida. This is like population 15,000, just outside Tampa. But, this was on Friday, right before Super Bowl weekend in Tampa, like a little bit terrifying in terms of timing. And there we don't know how they got in, but, if I had to guess, it would probably be a phishing attack, like an email and then the little water treatment facility didn't have 2-factor authentication turned on, which would have kept someone from another, strange device logging into their networks. So the reason Oldsmar is because these smaller critical infrastructure operators, which in the United States are mostly private companies, don't have the security resources or budgets of a PG&E, let's say. And so because they're under-resourced, they often allow contractors to remote into their systems from afar to make sure everything's going smoothly or troubleshoot a problem if there is one. And that access becomes very opportunistic for a cyber criminal who wants to, in that case, exact destruction. And what they did was, thank God, there was an engineer sitting at his computer system on Friday. He saw his mouse, his cursor move around on his screen, didn't think anything of it because supervisors remote into these systems all the time. And then 5.5 hours later, saw that same cursor go into the functions that control the chemical levels in the drinking supply, moved up the amount of lye, L-Y-E, from 100 parts per million to 11,000 parts per million. If that had made its way into the drinking supply, those 15,000 people would be at the hospital. And you know what's happening at hospitals right now because of COVID. That could have been a really deadly attack. Fortunately, some guy just happened to be watching his computer screen at that very moment. Fortunately, it takes 24 hours to 36 hours for that water, contaminated water, to make its way to the tap. So they say that they had sensors along the way that would have caught this. And maybe, thank God, but there are plenty of smaller critical infrastructure operators that don't have those sensors set up, that don't have someone sitting at their screen. And those become very ripe targets for anyone with, an axe to grind.
So, I mean, that's like really an attempted mass murder. I mean, there's really no other way to really describe that. I mean, I guess, because, the person.
I mean, I have a hard time because what it really is, to be honest, is a terrorist attack. It's an attempt at a terrorist attack. If someone was doing this, someone went to your local reservoir and poured poison in, and that made its way and killed and sickened tons of people, we would call that terrorism, right? But because these things are done with code, and because a lot of the people who work with these systems and work on security are scared of scaring the bejesus out of all of us, They don't call it a terrorist attack. And I do think that's important. Don't overhype the threat, but also don't underhype it, because this thing happened on Friday and it was a very close call, and we've had a lot of close calls.
I guess I when we talk about terrorism, I think like part of that is a function of like what is the intent, like what is the purpose, right. And all we know now is like, if some someone who's just a bad person who's like, I like this, an arsonist essentially, I'm going to pour this into the reservoir for just because I like the idea that I'm hurting people. I mean, that I guess that's the. I'm a little bit concerned about that designation only because of the implications of it, because at the end of the day, we need the security. We need it to protect against people who have a political ideology that they may be doing these things, or that may just be like, I like to see people suffer, like whatever it is. But I guess in the final analysis, like what is the federal response to something like this when you're talking about, a 15,000 person town in Florida? Like, is this just something we're just going to have to live with on some level? Or are we dealing with big, sophisticated players? Or are we dealing with just like opportunistic people?
So in that case, if I had to guess, I'm going to guess it's probably some disgruntled person somewhere, not a nation state. But it's worth remembering that 7 years ago, we caught an Iranian hacker inside a dam mucking around with the controls that control the locks to the dam. Now, that was an interesting story, actually, because it was the Bowman Avenue Dam in New York, just 30 miles outside Manhattan. But when the White House first learned that there was an Iranian hacker poking these dam systems, and they heard the word Bowman Dam, they thought it was the Arthur Bowman Dam in Oregon, which if they had unleashed the locks there would have been like a cyber tsunami. So, but it turns out the Bowman Avenue Dam in New York like holds back a tiny babbling brook, and no one lives right under it, and et cetera. So anyway, just pointing that out. I think that it doesn't really matter on some level who the actors are, because whether it's a teenager in his basement or it's Iran or it's Russia, like they all have these capabilities, right? So it's almost like just start looking at it as a matter of defense. Like we just don't want a bored teenager or Russia or Iran in our dam locks, in our water treatment facilities. And these threats are real now. They are happening. They are happening every week. And so it's time to ask ourselves, do we really need to have the locks of our major dams remotely accessible on the internet? Do we really need to have the chemical levels and controls at a water treatment facility accessible through the internet? No, we probably don't need to be doing that. And that's going to cost money. It means that they can't have engineers remote in from hundreds of miles away. They need someone sitting there on premises watching these things. And even then, even someone on premises in an air-gapped system disconnected from the internet, we know that those can be vulnerable too, because that's what we did with Stuxnet. We don't know what happened, but we know that was an air-gapped system that wasn't on the internet, but we know someone brought in a USB stick. But it's a lot harder to bring in a USB stick or get a spy to bring in a USB stick than it is to remote in through software.
Well, Nicole Perloff, the book is This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends, the Cyberweapons Arms Race. Thanks so much. Fascinating and sort of terrifying. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Sorry I was upside down there for a minute.
No worries. All right, going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in a minute. We just have a couple of seconds left, but it occurs to me, one of the problems that we have with technology, I imagine this is worldwide, but certainly in this country, is you've got these places that are trying to save a lot of money we have remote engineers as opposed to coming in. Or instead of having moderators for our YouTube videos, we have algorithms. This is all about profits. Mm-hmm. It's all about profits for a private contractor coming in and helping with your water system, your treatment plant. And to a certain extent, at one point, we're going to have to make the determination that we can't afford this because it's too dangerous. Scary stuff. We will be back tomorrow. talking more about impeachment and voting that's happening or not happening across the country because Republicans are shutting down the access to the ballot. We'll see you then. And for those of you sticking around, we're going to talk more impeachment in the rest of the show. It's where we can we're going to head into the fun half, as you know, Emma.
Yes.
You're aware of that?
I just got I don't know if I should say this. I just got a text from a friend saying, Bruce Castor, do you recognize that name?
Bruce Castor.
I went to college with his son.
Oh, you did? Well, there you go.
Third.
EC3, nice.
Oh, Bruce Castor the third. Wow. I mean, were you good friends with him? No.
What frat was he in?
Zeta Psi.
I don't even know what that means. I honestly don't. We didn't have frats at my college, so I have no idea what that means.
I don't even know if I should have said that. Yeah. I crossed paths with him, but I didn't know him well.
Well, this is fun half stuff.
I remember salmon pants being worn. That's really about it.
I don't know what that means either. I missed all of this. I had no idea of any of it. Salmon pants or Zeta Kappa or whatever. None of that. Folks, just a reminder, it's your support that can make the show possible. You become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. jointhemajority.report.com. And you will support this program. Also, don't forget AM Quickie. Check it out. 6-7 minutes in the morning. Headline news happens very early. I know that because Dorsey called me at 6:30 in the morning. I forgot to send the file. So he got it out the door. Today on the Nomi Key Show, you can find that at youtube.com/the Nomi Key Show or twitch.tv _Nomikey_show. David Korn and Deborah Levitt will be on 3 p.m. Check that out. Also, don't forget the Antifada, twitch.tv/the Antifada. Jamie's been on vacation, but I think she's back tomorrow. So check that out. Also, Matt, what's happening on the Matt Lekian media platform, as it were?
Yeah, so our interview with Grace Blakely on Left Reckoning is going to be next week. Tomorrow night, we're going to have Ben Burgess on for his return. We're going to get into logic of the left with him and some other stuff. So Ben Burgess, me, David, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Eastern time on Left Reckoning's YouTube channel.
I think I'm going on Ben's podcast next Monday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I mean, not next Monday, the Monday after that.
I was going to say President's Day.
Yeah, no.
Matt, you'll be happy to know that I told Saul. Saul was playing he's got, I don't know, it's like roadblocks and this and that. And he's flying around on a dragon. And he's flying around on a dragon. He's saying, and I said, like, where are you going? He goes, I'm just flying around. It's pretty cool. And I said, Matt, who works on my show, he'll fly around in like a fake real airplane and look at like the ground of like, maps. You can see places. And I said, isn't that cool? And he's like, no.
I mean, dragons are a little bit cooler than, Cessnas, but.
Yep. Folks, Hunt a Killer is the murder mystery subscription box that's the most exciting date night you can do at home. Hunt a Killer brings people together by challenging them to decode ciphers, examine clues, and solve puzzles. It's like an escape room delivered right to your door. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority and use promo code majority for 20% off your first box. Again, make sure to use the code majority for a 20% discount. Folks, we'll see you in the fun half. 646-257-3920.
In for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back, 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 back.
You're a madman!
And the alpha males are back, back, back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danergy's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danergy.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Almost has what? Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black.
Come on! Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back. Sorry. I just got caught up in a... I'm going to have to put that on hold. Got caught up on a text thread. People are skeptical about wearing 2 masks because of COVID. This is...
Swiss cheese principle.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to... I'm not going to say who this is, but... it's not like you folks would know who it is, but I mean, this is the response, because someone on the thing put CDC says tight fit masks or double masking with cloth and surgical mask increases. This is a New York Times article. I imagine it means increases your protection. Somebody else wrote it doesn't change anything unless it's 100%. I think that everyone should go into isolation or accept COVID as part of life nowadays. Now, this is absurd. This is like saying, look, if you're going to jump out the window of a building, it doesn't make a difference if you're going from the 3rd floor or the 12th floor.
Yeah.
You know what? It makes a difference. You have a greater chance of dying.
And some people can't go into isolation, guys. And
Well,
some
no,
people...
but this is, they're not suggesting you go into isolation. They're saying that, like, there's no point in mitigating. If you can't mitigate the risk 100%.
That's insane, because you know that if you even... The amount of viral load that you get also affects how sick you get in many cases.
It's absurd in a half a dozen different ways. And...
you hear that? You're absurd.
It is an ideological... It is an ideological perspective. I don't want to say any more, too. The other factors that are also sort of like associated with who sent me this text, this group text. I'm going to get myself in trouble. Let's go to the phones so I can have a palate cleanse. Yeah, exactly.
I'm being a snitch on someone I knew in college. So
there you go. Calling from an 804 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 804. Who's this?
Hey, this is Jake from Blacksburg, Virginia.
Jake from Blacksburg, Virginia. What's on your mind, Jake?
So I just want to talk about this inherent idea that I believe exists within a lot of low info and moderate voters, that basically Republicans equal lower taxes. And then if you want to take it a step further, they also coincide with a better economy. My theory is basically that a large portion of these voters basically don't care who or what party is in office. They just vote for whoever they think it helps their material conditions, which happens to be Republicans in their worldview. I don't really accept that 74 million Americans wanted Trump to be president. I would argue that at least a couple million of these voters are just people who go in and check the box for Republican because that means lower taxes. My question is, what do you think about this, and what can Democrats do to change this idea?
Well, I think there's a significant number of people who go in and vote for lower taxes. I mean, of that 74 million, I would be shocked to find out that more than a couple of million who voted for Romney, let's say, didn't vote for Donald Trump. I mean, there are Republican voters, I think, but I think there's different cohorts of them. But yeah, of course, some people vote on just, and I would say this time around, more than most, some of those voters were like, I just find him too personally, abhorrent to.
Well, the numbers on the economy compared to Biden and Trump were closer than many past presidential elections. That Biden and Biden was like, last I saw before the election, 2 points below Trump and who would handle the economy better, or 2 points ahead, which is fairly unheard of when it comes to a Democrat versus a Republican in the presidential race. I think there is,
it's tough to sort of like to generalize off of the either one of the Trump elections, it seems to me. But yes, broadly speaking, people who are really concerned about tax cuts will probably have a significant amount of money relative to most Americans. Although I would imagine that, you're not just talking like the top 5% or 10%. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of Republicans who, they think government's bad. They don't want, they want their taxes cut. Now, you can also dig a little deeper from that, right? Because sometimes that's not necessarily a surrogate, but that is an indication of what, some people are just like, look, I want to hoard as much of my money as I can. And there's an ignorance as to what government does. Or there's, I don't care what government does. I don't, the belief that I don't need government, even though I use the roads and I use the toilets and I use the safety that comes with food. But there's other people who are like, well, the government's just giving my money to other people. And by other people, I mean people not like me. And by people not like me, if I'm a Republican, statistically speaking, I'm talking about non-white people. And that is also sort of like in that stew of why you would be anti-tax. What do we do to deal with that? We make it as explicitly clear as possible to as many people as possible that government does good things. In part, that is like obscure, removing the things that obscure what government does. And in part, it's also adding to what government does so that there are material benefits to people. And that is like, there is an argument out there that I'm reading, some people feel that we have turned the corner, at least in terms of how Democrats rhetorically approach this question. We are out of the Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan era where government is the problem and, something else is the solution. We seem to have turned a corner, and maybe part of it is because Donald Trump was so literally bad at executing some basic functions of government. I mean, we can see this across the board. It's sort of shocking. I mean, every single thing I read about, it is, we're looking at what had been dismantled over the past 4 years. And part of it is also, a pandemic because government is not the problem here. The lack of government, the lack of utilizing government is the problem in terms of addressing a pandemic. And so
But I think the caller, I don't know if he's still on the line, Jake. But Jake, are you also talking about just general people who are fairly apolitical, low information, who are less focused on low taxes and more focused on, I want the economy to be good, and they're so used to a perception of Republicans making the economy be good that that's kind of what the driving force is in their reflexive vote?
Yeah, that's definitely a part of the perspective, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, to me, that is a little troubling because we did see some of Trump's coalition expand to, like, he did a lot better with Latino voters. A lot of that was because of hammering socialism, I think, in many ways. And also because Biden explicitly said we don't see Latinos as a part of our path to victory. So he really did not emphasize campaigning on and bringing those voters in. But I hear what you're saying because I've come across people like that as well, and it's a kind of a tale as old as time, I guess. That's what that perception has been, and Democrats have been really bad about making that case. Just point out when were the last two economic downturns? It was under Trump, right now that we're experiencing during the pandemic, and then they might say, well, nothing could be done. What happened under Bush? Okay, so there you can try to combat that with empirical data about what happened to the national economy under the last two Republican presidents. That's my advice.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys' perspective. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling in. Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 818.
Hey, Sam. Dave from Jamaica.
Dave from Jamaica.
Cool. How you guys doing?
How are you?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah. Oh, I'm doing fine. A little bit of delay.
All right. I hope it's not going
I'm doing fine. It's just a bit of a delay.
Yes. And now it sounds like there's a bit of an echo because you just said that twice.
Uh-oh. Okay. So I'll just make it a quick one. I want it to be a little fun. You said you used to do taekwondo for a couple of years. I also used to do it too. What got you into that? Just curious. You don't strike me as the martial arts type because I've not seen any movies where you use that expertise per se.
Yeah.
Dave, I think the delay that we have in your hearing me has also caused you to have a dispositional shift that I think is inappropriate. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, that I don't seem to be the type. But yeah, no, there was a woman who I was interested in who was taking taekwondo, and I figured I would try it. Yep.
Okay.
That's what it was.
There we go. Look, I mean, that's what got me into hockey. My high school boyfriend was into hockey, and now I love hockey.
There you go.
So it was fun.
Look, so there's no shame in it.
Dave, I'm going to...
But how long were you in taekwondo, Sam?
5 or 6 years.
Yeah, you have to drop me. I'm delaying.
Yeah.
Later.
All right, bye. 5 or 6 years.
Was your high school boyfriend a hockey player himself?
Yes, and his brother...
that explains the head injuries he must have gotten that made him a Rangers fan from New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Shots fired.
Jesus Christ. Well, they didn't want to be a part of a dumpster fire Devils organization. But I have no leg to stand on. James Dolan owns the Rangers. I understand. Okay? I get it.
Three Stanley Cups since, 95. You guys got none.
This is what happens when you have too many New Jersey people on the show. It's like all talking about James Dolan and the Rangers, and bats, and stuff like that. Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. What's on your mind, Josh?
First off, I just want to say that I agree with you, Sam. Tom Brady's the greatest of all time. I'm not just trying to kiss your ass. I grew up a Brady fan as I was a Michigan supporter. So, just saying.
Yeah, well, now you have Harbaugh. Enjoy that.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. I'll talk about how Aaron Rodgers has as many NFC championships as Rex Grossman. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about how badly Cuomo is fucking up this second wave of COVID.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I slam Cuomo, Sam?
Gladly, please do.
You know how sensitive I am about protecting Andrew Cuomo's reputation, but go ahead. One.
I'll try to be as nice and gentle as possible.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, he's opening up indoor dining. What the fuck? I mean, like, so like the case rate's what, like 8,000, and there's no like real plan to vaccinate restaurant workers, and also, especially given the fact that with the vaccination, as far as I understand, and my mom's actually getting vaccinated tomorrow, so I'm going to have to investigate this. As far as I understand this, that even after you get your first dose, and I've heard people who have gotten COVID after getting their first dose because it takes both doses, and I think like a week, a multiple week-long period afterwards to actually become as effective as possible.
Right.
This seems like a completely like just a way of basically killing people because he doesn't want to cancel rent. As to that, like he didn't, I mean, we can have the debate about in-person learning, but like the plan is still as messy and nonsensical as ever in terms of like in-person learning, and it just seems like he really like. I remember calling in. I said like, is he gonna fuck this up like he did the last time? And I gotta be honest, he's coming close to fucking it up like he did the last time.
Without a doubt. I mean, look. Here's the thing: we're in a very, very precarious spot right now, right? Because there is nothing worse than the false confidence that is coming from some people being vaccinated, and also the numbers are starting to go down a little bit, but we're on the verge of having a far more transmittable strain basically take predominance in the country. The idea that you would open up indoor dining now, when the other thing is, like, we are 6 weeks away from being able to have like legit outdoor
dining.
Outdoor dining.
I did outdoor dining in February. I did it January. I did it like last week, and it was horrible. But
we're 4 to 6 weeks away from getting into like the 50s on a regular basis and it's like we just need to hold on to there. And I do think it's exactly what you're talking about. He does not want to stop evictions. He doesn't want to give people excuses for not working. He probably wants to take people off the unemployment rolls. He wants to, all of these things are conspiring, and it's very possible that we're going to look, and it's true. Like, look, even if you get the flu vaccine, you're not covered by the flu vaccine for 2 or 3 weeks after you get the vaccine. And then, of course, the flu vaccine has a 50 to 60% efficacy rate. Even if you get 2 shots, you only have a 90 to 95% efficacy rate. So some people are going to get it. But the whole point is and it's become very clear to me, and I've always known this in the concept of vaccinations, but public health is very difficult to manage because it is not public health's agenda and sort of like benchmarks is different from individual health, right? Like, like what is good for public health, broadly speaking, is not necessarily good for any specific individual, right? Because, like, look, there's, and unfortunately so far, it appears that there is no serious reaction to this vaccine. As far as I know, there's been no reports of anybody dying from this vaccine, or even getting like maybe a couple scattered reports of people having, an intense allergic reaction. But we've seen millions of doses of these vaccines administered at this point. So this vaccine is particularly safe. But there are vaccines that are going to be, dangerous for a specific individual, just like surgery, right? Like no doctor would ever tell you, like, okay, I've got a cancerous tumor. And the doctor would say, like, we're going to go in there, but the odds are not like it's 100% right thing to do. It's like it's a 90% right thing to do. But that's what you do. You go with the odds. 10% of the people, when you go in for surgery, they die of anesthesia or whatever it is. That is like, that's the way you determine what health is. That's what's so amazing about that person texting me like, if it's not 100%, we don't do it. What? There's no medical procedure that you take that's 100%. I mean, maybe there's some, but not many.
Yeah, and Josh, just to back up your argument about him, you realize that like 9 of the officials, the health officials that worked with him on the pandemic, resigned because he wouldn't listen to their
he's an a-hole.
advice. But he's Trump. He's just blue Trump. It's the same thing, and he's smarter. But like, he's a bully. He's authoritarian in terms of his tendencies. And yeah, I mean, I like the idea that he wrote a book on COVID with him on the cover about. Yeah.
It's laughable. And there's a bar actually near me. It's a Chicago bar in Bushwick, and I was speaking with them like before. It was around December, I think, because they sort of closed for the season when the weather got bad, but they never did indoor dining. And I was like, I was asking them because a lot of other bars that were about the same size, it's a pretty small bar, were doing indoor dining and drinking. I was like, well, I'm glad you guys didn't do that because, I felt safe going there. And he's like, I could never put like my,
wait staff,
my bartenders and also the people who visit the bar and are just going inside to get like a drink or whatever at risk. And it wasn't worth it to me. And he's like, we need to like cancel rent. Like, that's the only way you're going to get out of this, because the money he was going to make from like serving like a limited people indoors is going to nowhere near cover like what he was losing anyway.
Of course.
It's just mind blowing to me and absurd. One more thing, I got the fudges, dude. Oh my God.
You got the what?
The fudge.
Oh, the CBD fudge?
Oh my God.
Right?
Sam. I discovered the meaning of life.
It is honestly super good. It's delicious fudge, and I definitely feel the for 25 meg, it's different when you eat it, I think.
Yeah, it's different than the gummies.
Yeah.
I like the gummies too.
Appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, Cuomo is just garbage.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know if there's a worse Democrat in the country, if I'm being honest.
Well, I mean, close proximity makes you see it. Really, the ugliness is.
Well, it's the idea of like what he could do with with what the state allows based on how blue it is.
His war, as it were, right? What is it? What was it? W over what is that war that Saber
wins above replacement?
Yeah, wins above replacement is super low.
Oh yeah,
he's a -4 probably.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about this Neera Tanden hearing?
Okay, yeah. Let's. Neera Tanden is been getting grilled in front of the budget committee. And it really, I mean, it really does make you wonder. Like, I understand. I mean, from my perspective, this is complete conjecture on my part. This was Joe Biden saying, thank you, Hillary Clinton.
Yes. Thank you, Clinton orbit.
Yes. This and
no one's more Clinton than Neera Tanden.
Honestly, I mean, this is my speculation, anyways. But man, like, talk about like doing yourself damage. Like, this is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Like, she does not have any special skills, it seems to me, to warrant OMB or anything for that matter. Like there has to be a replacement version of Neera Tanden who doesn't come with all this baggage that she has. Even if from a policy standpoint, the things that she has said and her perspective on this stuff is garbage, whether it's like, let's take their oil in Libya or just feeling comfortable taking the money that she did to support these things. The Twitter stuff is like, incidental, it seems to me, but it's clear, her hostility, but towards, progressives, et cetera, but why would you do the thing that was good about the Obama administration was just no drama. Why would you do this? Why would you open yourself up to this?
Well,
I guess
it's the same reason that he's, rewarding Merrick Garland with the attorney general pick. Biden is personal loyalty. It seems like that's his deal. But it doesn't matter if it comes at the expense of people's fitness for a certain position or other things like that. I mean, and then if you were a conspiracy theorist about this about her appointment, wow, the incoming chair of the Senate Budget Committee is Bernie Sanders. He's directly responsible for the hearings. It's almost too
well, it's
perfect.
not a question of conspiracy theory. I'm sure that, it's not like they couldn't have contemplated this is be good. This is a sop to the Clintons, and the Clintons, I don't think this is, people know this is not a conspiracy or even a theory. The Clintons hate Bernie Sanders, and this is it's just petty. It's petty. And, there's been some very good picks that Biden's had, particularly on the sort of sub-cabinet level. In terms of getting a lot of applauded progressives. This was not a great one. Here is should we play this clip?
Yeah, Bernie Sanders basically acknowledging that she has been very vitriolic towards progressives. I haven't been able to see for the past 4 years her tweets because I am blocked. Sam, are you on that list as well?
I believe I am. I wasn't following her, so I didn't.
She blocked me after I think I called out.
Let me see.
The fact that she was a part of Hillary Clinton's racist campaign against Barack Obama in 2008.
I'm not blocked by her.
Yeah. Anyway, here it is.
That's important that we debate the issues and try to minimize the level of personal and vicious attacks that seem to be so prevalent all over this country today. I have a letter in front of me from, as I'm sure you have seen, a number of Republican members of the House concerned about some of the things you said as the head of CAP. But of course, your attacks were not just made against Republicans. There were vicious attacks made against progressives, people who I have worked with, me personally. So as you come before this committee to assume a very important role in the United States government at a time when we need serious work on serious issues and not personal attacks on anybody, whether they're on the left or the right, can you reflect a little bit about some of your decisions and the personal statements that you have made in recent years?
Yes, Senator, I really appreciate that question, and I recognize that my language and my expressions on social media, caused hurt to people, and I feel badly about that. And I really regret it, and I recognize this. It's really important for me to demonstrate that I can work with others, and I look forward to taking that burden. And I apologize to people on either the left or right who are hurt by what I've said.
Okay, let me just first off, when you have to appoint somebody who's going to lead any type of organization, and it's incumbent upon them to say at their hearing, I need to be able to prove that I can work with others. Seriously? Maybe that should be just that should be baseline.
That's kindergarten baseline.
You know what? We got 300 million people in the country. Let's just pick somebody who doesn't have to prove that they can work with others, but just everybody knows they can work with others. That's why, and then we can move up from there.
Well, she had to delete 1,000 tweets before these confirmation hearings. She did it last month. A lot of it was attacking Republicans. Fine, go ahead.
Why don't you delete all of them? I don't understand why.
But why even delete them? We can see them still. You're a public figure. You were the head of one of the most, established Democratic think tanks in Washington, D.C., and you used it in an insane way to take down progressives and attack them. An absolutely unhinged way. She was accused of hitting Bernie Sanders' campaign manager from 2020 when he worked there.
Yep. Her response is the most Eddie Haskell. I don't know if people even know what that is anymore. The most sort of, this is like when I chastise my daughter for something and she just immediately turns on like, you're right, Dad. I'm really sorry. I won't do that again next time. And you know what? She does it again.
Right.
That's just like complete auto mode. But let me also just say this about Sanders. Bernie has an agenda. And, I imagine there's going to be some quarters are like, Bernie's not sticking up for us. He's not like hammering her. He's just going to sign off and rubber stamp it for Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders has an agenda that is actually like legitimately important to people, like a $15 minimum wage. Bernie Sanders has an agenda to empower workers and unions, to make sure that there's expansion of programs for real human beings, that people get more health care, as much as he can get for people. And he's got to make a decision. Is he going to expend his political capital on crapping on Neera Tanden because she's a horrible person? And, honestly, she is a middling pick for OMB. She is no worse than probably a half a dozen people who are lined up behind her if she was to not get rejected. No, certainly no better. And he's got to decide, am I going to expend my political capital on dealing with Neera Tanden, or am I going to expend my political capital on providing material benefits to the extent that I can for people? Which would you prefer? The $15 minimum wage, which I don't know that we're even going to get.
Or dunking on her?
Well,
I think some corners of the internet, and I think we are well aware of who those people would be, would prefer that because that's their politics, right? Bernie Sanders obviously is interested in actual politics and actually improving people's lives materially. So, no love lost for Neera Tanden. I don't think she's sincere in her apology. I think that she has displayed a shocking amount of gall and lack of morality, not just in her tweeting, but in exactly what you said about her, the leaked emails that said she wanted to carpet bomb Libya, something like that, or
she was like, we should get them, we should pay for our bombing with their oil.
Yeah, absolute insane.
That's what Donald Trump said.
That's what Dick Cheney.
That's what Donald Trump said about Iraq.
And then of course, all of the money, the disgusting blood-drenched potentially, or at least oil-drenched and other terrible industries money that she took at CAP. An organization that was ostensibly supposed to push forward progressive issues, that she made a shell of itself in order for her to get basically paid and for the organization to raise money and then push those interests forward. It's actually very sad because that organization could have done a lot of good based on the infrastructure that it had, and it was hollowed out by her and the Clinton orbit that she surrounds herself with. So no love lost for Neera Tanden, but as somebody who's going to direct OMB, she's not Secretary of State. It's not the end of the world, and Sanders, once again, being the bigger person, putting his personal agreement aside in order to advance his policy agenda. That's just, that's who he is.
All right, let's turn to let's play that clip from is it Kennedy, or who is that? What's his face? That one that one that you sent, Emma, and the slide. Let's play this one.
Hold on, what?
This one, you sent that to me. Oh,
wait.
Oh wait, no, that one you sent to the thing. Let's play that, Brendan. Yeah.
It's not just one or two. I think you deleted about 1,000 tweets. And it wasn't just about Republicans. And I don't mind disagreements in policy. I think that's great. I love the dialectic. But the comments were personal. I mean, you call Senator Sanders everything but an ignorant slut.
That is not true.
And when
That's an Office reference, but that's Senator Kennedy, right?
Wait, that's a what? Office reference? Ignorant slut?
At one point, Michael says to Dwight, you ignorant slut.
Yeah, do you know where that came from?
What?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Shit. Damn it, did I do something embarrassing?
That's originally a Blues Brothers? Or no, a SNL Aykroyd, right?
It was Aykroyd and...
Jane Curtin.
I've seen that sketch. Yeah, I've seen it. Sorry.
It's Weekend Update. It was every week.
Yeah, I've seen it. I'm sorry.
I'm
that
old.
was
I'm old.
but that's how our generation kind of knows it from
Oh
The
my
Office.
God.
Hey, on the Peacock app, you can watch both all the archive of SNL and The Office.
Nice.
That was Senator Kennedy shouting out Peacock.
What's interesting about that is that exchange, like, it's not gonna, like, that lowers the temperature on the conservative side.
Yeah.
And it's really geared towards, like, trying to agitate the left. But I think that's sort of, I think that's a fool's errand on their part.
Yeah, Kennedy really cares about Bernie Sanders' feelings.
That's right. That's right. All right, let's talk about the impeachment. This poor guy. I mean, everything Trump touches turns to garbage. It really does.
Not gold?
Not gold.
No, he surrounds himself with gold, and then as soon as he
Slowly,
touches it, it turns
exactly.
to garbage. It's the reverse Jesus. Except he's the closest thing we've seen.
Reverse
And
Midas.
also Midas.
Yeah, I'm not hitting on all cylinders
No,
today. Damn it.
Here is Bruce Castor with his opening remarks, basically saying, like, we had to change everything when we heard that they actually had a case. Here it is.
I'll be quite frank with you. We changed what we were going to do on account that we thought that the House manager's presentation was well done. And I wanted you to know that we have responses to those things. I thought that what the first part of the case was, which was the equivalent of a motion to dismiss, was going to be about jurisdiction alone. And one of the fellows who spoke for the House managers, who's a former criminal defense attorney, seemed to suggest that there's something nefarious that we were discussing jurisdiction and trying to get the case dismissed. But this is where it happens in the case, because jurisdiction is the first thing that has to be found. We have counter arguments to everything that they raised, and you will hear them later on in the case from Mr. Van der Veen and from myself.
Mr. Van der Veen is the lawyer who sued Trump last year in 2020.
Yeah, for fraud. So basically what he's coming in and going like, we screwed up. We thought that we would be arguing one thing, and then they did too good of a job, and we didn't really contemplate like they might have a case. And
the
so
test was on that chapter?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know. It's like, sorry, the movie was bad, but we just thought like we wouldn't need to have sound, and batteries ran out when we were recording things and that type of thing. So just want you to know, like, if we had seen the actual film, it would have been really good. This guy goes on. It really is amazing because you keep watching this guy's opening remarks and you're thinking like, oh, okay, this is the old, like, I'm trying to ingratiate myself. And here comes, like, I'm slow wind up and then here's the fastball.
Yeah.
And then it's just like slow wind up into slower wind up into slow wind up. And then it doesn't go anywhere.
No, and then it's Fauci's first pitch in the Nationals game.
Here exactly. It just sort of like dribbles in each time. Mm-hmm. Here is him talking about he keeps going on. It's really just like you feel like he is looking at his notes and he realizes like, I brought the wrong notebook. And he had said just before he went up to the podium, he goes like, Billy, grab me the blue notebook. It's in my briefcase downstairs in the bathroom. And he's just like going along, just like trying to vamp, waiting for someone to bring his real notes in. Here he is. Let's play clip number 3. This is where he's like talking about how weird it is the way that people like refer to their senators.
It's funny. This is an aside, but it's funny. You ever notice how when you're talking or you hear others talking about you when you're home in your state, they will say, You know, I talk to my senator, or I talk to somebody on the staff of my senator. It's always my senator. Why is it that we say my senator? We say that because the people you represent are proud of their senators.
No, it's because they are the senator from
their state. How, like, I'm trying to even think, like, what the other construction would be.
My state's senator. I'm sorry, Mr. Castor, that people colloquially use a shorthand, but that doesn't actually translate into pride.
I spoke to my state's federal senator. I spoke to the individual who represents this state in the federal Senate and one of the two bicameral houses. Anyways, not my senator. I'm sorry. I don't have pride in that person.
No, it's you don't own the senator.
The individual that, I mean, and what's also amazing about that is, like, it didn't come off as an aside. He, like, seemed to, like, it was just the most bizarre presentation. Here he goes. Now, pick up number 4. He's just, like, meandering through this stuff. Number 4.
Don't know about off the top of my head, but each one of them, once there was the vacuum created that the greatest deliberative bodies, the Senate of Greece sitting in Athens, the Senate of Rome, the moment that they devolved into such partisanship, it's not as though they ceased to exist. They ceased to exist as representative democracy, both replaced by totalitarianism.
Go play clip number 2. He's also full of stuff like, he gives these examples that they're supposed to be illustrative, and he clearly hasn't even given any thought to them because he's not specific in any way. Go play number 2. What did I?
And
lost on my notes. Where am I?
Senators of the United States, they're not ordinary people.
What?
They're extraordinary people, in the technical sense, extraordinary people.
What?
When I was growing up in suburban Philadelphia, my parents were big fans of Senator Everett Dirksen from Illinois. And Senator Dirksen recorded a series of lectures that my parents had on a record. And we still know what records are, right? On the thing you put the needle down on and you play it.
Nobody
and
younger than...
Here's little Bruce, 8, 9, 10 years old, listening to this back in the late 60s. And I would be listening to that voice. If you ever heard Everett Dirksen's voice, it's the most commanding, gravelly voice that just oozes belief and sincerity. Must have been a phenomenal United States senator. He doesn't talk about ordinary people as we do in the law. We apply the ordinary person standard. He talks about extraordinary people. He talks about gallant men, was the name of the album. And now, of course, in the sign of the times, gallant men and women. And I would watch television, and I would watch Senator Goldwater or Senator Byrd or Senator Mansfield, Senator Dole, and I would be fascinated by these great men.
Senator.
And everybody's parents.
What is he talking about?
Yeah.
I thought he was going to go somewhere with Dirksen. He's just talking about how, like...
He loved his voice.
I remember when I was younger, and there were politicians.
Yeah.
Some of them were really... had cool voices, and, like, I would listen... Like, I've been interested. I just want all you guys know, like, I've been interested in the Senate since I was a kid, so.
This is like when I would, try to talk in class when I was, like, stoned or something like that.
Wait, what? You went to class stoned?
Sometime senior year. It was a bad idea. But, I still did well.
Folks are listening. There you go. You're saying that he was, that Bruce Castor was high on the floor.
Yeah, I am.
Honestly, that would have been like, if he had just like finished the whole thing and said like, look, I am so baked right now. I can't
stop
even tell you.
thinking.
It's just like, let's just forget about this. Let's forget about it. Come on, man.
Everyone's an extraordinary person, man.
You guys are great. He's great. What happened here was not good, but let's just forget it.
You guys all great. You guys got all
I didn't have
some
my
great
notes.
voices.
I didn't have
right?
my notes.
But yeah, this is really like
I didn't have my notes.
The
I thought,
vibe of
look,
what?
there's nothing on my notes. I didn't like. I left my other notebook. So all right, here's what really happened. When I got to the Senate, I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. I left my bag in there. I told Billy to go down and get it. Apparently, somebody moved it because they thought it was a bomb. And I didn't want to say anything at the beginning of this because I didn't want to disappoint everybody. I was really excited to be here and just, I don't know. Can we just, all right.
I mean, it is the vibe of somebody who didn't prepare for a presentation. Oh, we're supposed to do PowerPoint?
I didn't
man.
know. I didn't know
I
this
thought
was
it
going to
was
be on
an
the
oral
test.
presentation.
I had no idea.
And I thought we were talking about our favorite senator, not about impeachment. Oh shit, dude.
This is how, like, you really need to play the whole thing to really see how bad it is. But if you want to get a taste of how bad it is, listen to Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana. I don't know where he would be on the list. There was a vote going into last week on the question that brought up by Rand Paul, question of impeachment. Is there jurisdiction? Rand Paul had a bill on the floor. It lost 55 to 45. Collins, Murkowski, Romney, Sass, and Toomey voted, yeah, there's jurisdiction. We can go ahead with this trial. It obviously wasn't during the impeachment itself, but that was the first part that had to happen. It was just like a test thing. If you had said to me, like, who do you think would be like the number 6 person to come out? I mean, I wouldn't know. I really would have been tough to make a guess. Maybe I would have said Portman or I don't know. Mm-hmm. But here is Bill Cassidy, who I think he was a prosecutor himself or something. A lot of these guys are lawyers, and I think it was just sort of like, I'm too embarrassed. I can't even. And he ended up voting that there was jurisdiction, and here he was a doctor. Here he is. Here he is. I'm a doctor, and if you operate on someone like this, that patient dies. So I had to. Here he is.
I said I'd be an impartial juror. Anyone listening to those arguments, the House managers were focused, they were organized, they relied upon both precedent, the Constitution, and legal scholars. They made a compelling argument. President Trump's team were disorganized. They did everything they could but to talk about the question at hand. And when they talked about it, they kind of glided over it, almost as if they were embarrassed of their arguments. Now, if I'm an impartial juror, and one side's doing a great job, and the other side's doing a terrible job on the issue at hand, as an impartial juror, I'm going to vote for the side that did the good job.
What does it mean for conviction?
I don't know. We haven't heard that yet. I'm an impartial juror.
Why do you think the Trump defense team did a terrible job?
Did you listen to it?
I did.
Okay, then it speaks for itself.
I found Castro hard to follow for sure. Other Republicans have praised Chauvin. Is that your feeling of things, or did you think that
Again, if you listen to it, it speaks for itself. It was disorganized, random, had nothing. They talked about many things, but they didn't talk about the issue at hand. And so if I'm an impartial juror and I'm trying to make a decision based upon the facts as presented on this issue, then the House managers did a much better job.
I wonder if, I mean, I don't think it'll mean anything, but I wonder if that isn't like, a little bit of an attack on some of his fellow Republicans. I mean, he keeps pushing, if I am impartial.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you always say, I think there's a little bit of branding going on here. We see this from some Republicans who want to appear like they are reasonable individuals. I mean, I think we saw some of this branding similarly done by Lamar Alexander, that I don't know if he would have been able to to vote and say those arguments were legitimate because they were so convoluted and full of nonsense. I mean, I think he just had it up to here. I think that Cassidy's going to vote not to convict, but he couldn't legitimize whatever Castor and Trump's defense team had brought forward. It's like a confluence of things.
It's going to be interesting because, I mean, what if they do as bad of a job with the second half of the trial as they did with that first question? Then he's going to be a little bit on the spot. I guess we'll see. Calling from a 614 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 614. 614, I can hear you. 614, going once. 614, going twice. 614, going... Gone.
Sold.
Sorry.
To me.
Calling from a 206 area code. 206.
Hey, how's it going, Sam? My name is Riley from Renton, Washington.
Riley from Renton, Washington. What's on your mind, Riley?
Yeah, so I was just, when you were talking about cyber weapons earlier, I was thinking about how there's been like this push to move, so like the JEDI contract, for example, where the Department of Defense is like outsourcing compute to Microsoft in this case. And I was just thinking about in terms of what you were talking about earlier with these kind of like exploits that are being found and being utilized by governments. There are these large like multinational companies like Microsoft and Amazon that are essentially hosting infrastructure for governments, multiple governments, and basically providing service to multiple governments. And so far, the result has been that they've kind of taken regulation requirements and applied them across the board, even if they don't apply to like the U.S., for example. So like for GDPR, they, like most of these large companies have taken that regulation and applied the principles across the board.
What is GDPR?
So I was just wondering,
what is that?
So that's basically the policy where, so in the EU, there's a data compliance policy where essentially any citizen can ask any tech company to erase their data after like, I think it's a month, everything from a month ago. So basically these large companies have applied it across the board to every nation. Basically anybody can do this. But what I'm wondering is like, you know, so far it hasn't been a huge issue. I don't think that there's these giant multinational companies that are kind of beholden to multiple governments. But there's so much money and power being given to these companies. Do you see that as being an issue, especially with regard to like what you were talking about, where there's these vulnerabilities and there's this weird secondary market to basically kind of like exploit bugs and all these companies and
I mean, yeah. Look, we saw this. We saw this. I think with the cooperation that AT&T and Verizon gave the NSA and the sort of spying, the spying regime that we saw in the mid-aughts, I guess. And there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, there are Facebook does certain things, or these other major platforms, I should say, just broadly speaking, will do the bidding of authoritarian government, maybe, and maybe, you know, provide some opportunities for those governments to sort of isolate and find certain users so that they can operate there and make a ton of money. I mean, yeah, it's really problematic. I mean, I think to some extent that's why you want things that are a little bit smaller, right? I mean, but yes, I think one of the biggest dangers is, I mean, look, we're also seeing it in sort of, I want to say less nefarious, but I think it's just as nefarious, but less cohesive ways, right? Where we're like, you have all this data out there, and the U.S. government is, agents like the DEA is buying cell phone data to get basically searches that are more or less ultimately warrantless. I mean, there's all sorts of different problems here that I just don't think that as a society we have caught up to how fast the technology has moved. I mean, that's I think a fairly classic problem, but yeah, I do think it's a problem. Appreciate the call.
Thanks.
Calling from a 214 area code. We had a lot of people in at the same time today. I guess that happens a lot now. 214.
Hey, is this me?
Yeah, it is. Who's this?
Hey, this is Lawton from Texas. How y'all doing?
Good. Lawton from Texas. What's on your mind?
Hey, I actually just wanted to ask you about the potential AOC primary against Chuck Schumer and why I kind of don't want it to happen. It's just like, I'm glad that she's putting pressure on him. It's making him a better senator. I want it, but I think she's too valuable, and because it's not like if you run for president where she could keep her seat, she would have to vacate it. And I hear journalists like Ryan Grimm say it would be an uphill battle for her, and I don't think we can really afford that. She has a lot of political capital, and I don't think we want to risk all that this early, especially when she's young and we'll get plenty of other opportunities. So I guess just like, what are your thoughts on it? And do you share my concerns? And I guess just what's the likelihood that it actually happens?
I agree with you completely.
I appreciate the call. I'll let you go and I'll answer. I agree with everything you're saying. My guess is that, and it's completely uninformed, I will say, that she has a similar assessment. But it certainly behooves all of us for her to pretend like, or to keep that door open, because as you say, Chuck Schumer is reacting to the possibility that she could run, and she would represent a legit threat to him. Legit threat. I think it would be a very difficult win, but she represents at least a legit threat, and that is a healthy thing. So,
and I don't think he's the kind of Democrat based on, based on how he's acting now that we need to primary. I mean, a lot of like what gives progressives legitimacy is that the targets of these primaries have often been explicitly a lot more horrible than Chuck Schumer.
Oh, I think he should be primaried. I just don't know that I would want
but
to.
with the cachet of someone like a progressive like AOC.
I think it's just a bad idea because it's too big of a risk for her. But I think somebody else coming in and primarying him is a very good idea. And the question is, can you find somebody who has either A, enough name recognition early on to represent a threat, B, an ability to raise money, small donors across the country. I don't know. But I will say this, Zephyr Teachout, when she ran against Andrew Cuomo, it was very surprising that she got 30% of the vote. To a lot of people, because she came out at, she wasn't a household name in New York by any stretch of the imagination. Cynthia Nixon also, obviously she had name cachet and she was going to get some free media. And a guy like Chuck Schumer doesn't want to lose 30% of the vote on in a primary. He doesn't want to.
I know. I mean, and that's part of why he's behaving in this way. It's just, Cuomo and Schumer not the same.
That's true.
I mean, one is demonstrably worse than the other. But, I also just think Ocasio-Cortez has a pretty, emotional and resonant relationship with her district. Like, in a way that, a lot of Congress people just kind of represent because they want power. But I think, she's very intimately involved in where she's from.
Maddie Moron on the IM says, just announce your run, Sam.
Keep the pressure on. Don't announce yet.
Well, I mean, look, it is something that I would have to talk to my family. I would have to, sit down with my family, take their temperature, as it were. I mean, I am not from New York, although I was born here and have lived here now for 30 years almost.
I think that's fine.
And
Romney just moved to Utah to become a senator.
Well, he was from Utah. He moved to Massachusetts to become
Okay.
governor.
He moved back to Utah.
Yeah.
Well, where was the place with his car elevator? Was that his California home?
Well, that's California.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
it's got multiple homes.
Yeah, no, obviously.
A Square, MR. The discussion with Digby was peak Sam Digby. After years of listening to you both deconstruct the Republican strategy and the state of politics that led to this current state, I would say it last 10 minutes must be clipped at 50 minutes into the podcast into 1 hour and 5 and shared. Emma, the filibuster is more necessary for the GOP since now only the thing left is obstruct for the cult to think they're doing something.
Agreed.
Bear at Home 2. Like and subscribe because it will make Jimmy Dore cry.
Like the stream.
Tushy McGee. The nearest story really makes me miss Michael. I can hear his nihilist Bernie impression coming in. Well, I could fight for $15 minimum wage and survival checks, or I could shit on Nira. Marjorie Taylor Swift. I've heard just enough of Thomas Brady and sports talk. We need Jamie back to talk about communism. She's on vacay. Big Dick Cheney energy. Emma making me feel old as hell, and I'm only 37. Lose, not looser, or Nomi. In regards to the conversation about Nomiki's pronunciation of her name, let's not forget in a previous episode, she mentioned that she does not care for the nickname Nomi. She tells of a mean girl in her past that she didn't like who kept using that nickname.
Wow.
King
Sam,
Solomon.
You're opening up old trauma for her.
If you made a Venn diagram between the force the vote people and people upset about Neera Tanden's confirmation, it will be a complete circle. I can tell you that that's not the case. But rank and file, Finn sneaky funny, massive quip game, bring it, be Finn. Mars from Chicago. I remember that allegory in Catholic school where Jesus turned the water into gold. The people at the wedding preferred that gift over the wine. Oh, all right. I was not familiar with that one. So Lovey.
No, that's a joke.
I'm trying to remind people, smash that like button.
This is not the greatest impeachment defense in the world. No, this is just a tribute. Couldn't remember the greatest impeachment defense in the world. No, this is a tribute. Patrick from Kansas City. The I'm just a caveman defense. Jay Tingle, Castor has a point. I recall that I never referred to Lieberman as my senator. Everett Dirksen had a hit single with the Gallant Men, which peaked at number 29, January 21, 1967. Various records debated the Vietnam War in the mid-late 1960s. The squares were finally pushed to the margins of popular music as FM radio gained audience share. Car elevators can't vote. Kevin from Philadelphia. Does Bruce Castor feel like a dinosaur right now? Insert Michael laugh. Train boy Bruce Castor is a Senate fan from way back. Sam from Ottawa. Those opening statements were like when you read an essay question wrong and only realize that you were standing it up to present. Wait, this thesis about the code of Hammurabi isn't about a gorilla? Seabass Gorka. Have you ever heard about Anna Kasparian publicly supporting the recall of California Governor Newsom? What are your thoughts?
I mean,
have you heard about?
Yeah, she told me about it. And I saw on Twitter, but I will confess I didn't watch the clip.
She supports the recall?
I believe so, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
DNA cheater. It doesn't matter how ridiculous the Republican defense is or how dishonest. I see the insanity in my own family and around my community. Country white folk either just don't get it or deep down inside don't care, or even deeper down inside are all on board with the ignorant white privilege. The bigger problem is that the Democratic Party serves the same master, only more politely. Great leap forward. As a follow-up to Dave from Jamaica's question, what's your favorite color, Sam? I love you, Dave. My favorite color? Probably blue. I mean, Horton's packed court. I would like to clarify that butt-based love story was in reference to the Tushy ad reads and also Charlie Kirk being an ass. I'll take my apology in the form of a sound drop.
I don't think so.
Rabbit.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Shouts out to Emma for going to class high. One time I took a brownie in the middle of my medical anthropology class. I call that participant observation.
Well, it was really this like one class called it was Education 101, and everyone took it to get an easy A. And so I did it with my group, my three best friends. We all took it together. And look, I grew out of it a little, but I was very high in college with them a lot.
Don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining.
Yeah, well, sure. And then we would all, I won't say their names, we would all get stoned together and go to this class. And it was so fun until we got yelled at.
Yeah, all right.
But I got an A in that class.
I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this as my daughter's a couple of years away from going to college. I don't want to hear that.
I'm sorry.
Folks, here is, like, they all, at Fox, they're all trying to figure out how they handled this, the embarrassment that was the first day impeachment defense for President Trump. Remember, only the best people. Only the best people, except not really. And remember, he's you never hear that anymore, right? Like, he's a businessman, he gets things done, he knows what he's doing. I mean, this guy's been sued so many times, you'd think he would have a decent lawyer to defend him.
They've all jumped ship.
Here's Brian Kilmeade having almost like a revelatory moment. Like, is it possible that all this incompetence that seems to surround Donald Trump is a function of Donald Trump?
On the other side, too, for Republicans, Mitch McConnell is not helpful if you're looking to see if Donald Trump's going to get off. He's indicating everyone should vote their conscience, even if they voted whether it was constitutional or not. They should still be open to it. No idea how he'll vote. Senator Burr came out after that terrible defense of the president by those two lawyers, one of which forgot to prepare anything. He said, Burr says, I ain't no lawyer, but I know that was bad stuff. Right. Alan Dershowitz, who's been a key impeachment advisor, says, don't know what he's doing. I don't understand it. Senator Lindsey Graham didn't know where he was going from there. So these are not helpful things that was happening on the president's behalf. You wouldn't blame him if he was upset, but it might have been the president's fault for firing his other attorneys that were doing all the preparing.
I mean, where are you when you are really concerned? You're convinced that the president is not guilty, but the leader of the Republican Party has told the other Republicans, vote your conscience. And then you think, that's a problem. We don't want these already incredibly biased members of the same party to vote their conscience, because then they may vote to convict this guy.
Brian Kilmeade is the king of the worst takes these days. Would you not say?
He doesn't understand that he is refuting his own comment. It's like he's the king of the cell phone.
Yeah.
On some level, he's scoring on his own goal all the time. You really don't want, these guys going out there and voting their conscience, because that's something that could lead to a conviction.
Yeah.
And oh wait, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud?
Well, I mean, so I guess in theory, he's trying to say that because the events of the Capitol insurrection were so horrific, that they would be emotionally manipulated into voting against Trump.
I mean, if that's like what he wants to say, he should probably spell that out, because that's a big difference from just do what you think is right.
But don't you understand, Sam? Consciences.
No, I don't know.
Consciences are signs of weakness. They're for betas. They're for little babies. Little babies.
I mean, there does seem to be, and this is what happens on the right.
Spanish Trump.
They will build they're building in I think they're genuinely afraid that he could actually get, convicted by the Senate. I think they're.
Well, we have a second McConnell float to the press.
Exactly.
We have a number two now.
It sort of just depends on what happens today and tomorrow, obviously. And I just don't. I think it's unlikely you're going to find another 11 votes. I think that's unlikely. But,
agreed.
You know, if they vote, if it's 60-40 and he's still not convicted, that looks bad, right? Like the 56, I think like that one other vote scared them a little bit. And you start to see them create an excuse. It's not Trump is guilty. It's not Trump doesn't have the ability to hire good lawyers. It's that, you know, Trump he's strong. He's tough. He fired those other lawyers. That's why. It's not even with the lawyers that he hired.
Right.
It's that he fired the other lawyers. And he didn't have enough time.
Yeah.
He didn't have enough time to find other lawyers. I mean, it really does seem like they are, you know, starting to...
They work backwards from their conclusion all the time, although you're seeing cracks here.
Yep.
But the conclusion is that Trump is omnipotent and is always correct, and we can't fault him. I mean, they have to. They are held captive by an audience that's trickling away. So the only way for them to make their commentary fit into the exact neat little package that their audience demands is to work backwards from Trump is awesome at all costs.
Yep. Should we do the cat filter? It's pretty funny.
I mean, yes.
Everybody's seen it.
This is not newsworthy, but I
sent
love
it to a bunch of people, and like every one of them was like, "Is this real?" And then also, 5 people have already sent this to me, but let's play it. This is. I've actually had a couple of proceedings like this, legal proceedings. You know, like
with cats.
You know, like. You know, as a function of the divorce, like of shoring up the divorce, you get, you know, they're doing all this distance stuff on Zoom. Wasn't a court case like this, but apparently a lawyer, you know, gets on Zoom. Presumably his kid was on there beforehand, and there was some filters already built in. And, well, this is what happened.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to
we're trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
See the guy's eyes up there. He says he's not a cat, and that's pretty funny.
I love the parts how like the filter, the eyes are designed to move. So when he's like looking down, the cat's nervous, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There you go. I mean, honestly,
so for the podcast audience, they're gonna miss out on that visual, but.
On that visual of the cat.
Yeah. All right, I'm glad we covered that.
You're not noticing anything else about?
Oh my god! I wasn't looking at the monitor. I was looking at you. Yeah, but it seems like we have a guest. No, he's gone.
There you go. He's gone. I am not a snowman, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to know that I'm not a snowman.
That's Santa Claus.
Or a deer.
Rudolph.
It's fantastic.
Wait, can I do this?
There's no way that I'm not doing this. There's no way I'm not doing this on a regular basis. Now that I've figured out that you can do this.
Where is this?
While you guys are playing with that, I'm going to share this thread here about this cat lawyer by Fisher. Funny story about Rod Ponton, the Zoom cat lawyer. I reported on him in 2014 when he was a local prosecutor, used the power of his office and roped in federal law enforcement to harass a former lover. Basically, there was a raid on a head shop, and it turned out that Ponton was briefly sexually involved with the woman who ran the head shop. He denies it. And during his time as DA, local and federal cops repeatedly tried to bust her for selling illegal synthetic marijuana. So,
wow.
Well, I feel silly now. As a bunny, after the seriousness of that story was just revealed.
That was poorly timed.
I think he should represent Trump, though.
He should.
That would be great. I wish that Trump's lawyers would show up on the floor of the Senate just wearing a cat outfit. Never mind a filter. All right, time for one more phone call, and then we'll do some IMs and we'll get out of here.
All right, I got to stop.
Calling from a 760 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 760. Going once, going twice. Gone. Let's go.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Calling from a 406 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Lucas. I'm calling from Montana.
Lucas from Montana. We're getting folks from all over the country these days.
That's the real America.
Anyway, I was just curious, like whether you folks had seen any of the drama documentaries about the Nixium cult that were airing this summer.
The what cult?
I haven't, but I do want to watch them because wasn't the woman in the cult one of the number 2? She was the Chloe from Smallville, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I used to love that show.
That's correct.
Wait, so what is this? What is the Nixian cult?
It's like a sex cult that they. Can you explain actually a little bit better than me since you saw the documentary?
So yeah, it's basically, it gets into how this cult, it was initially proposed as sort of a self-improvement type seminar where they built community, and they got you deeper and deeper until and the whole sex cult aspect was then something that sort of evolved out of that. But the big thing I thought was the whole mentality behind it.
And basically it was one guy that led it, right? And there was all these women that joined. And then he indoctrinated this D-list actress from this old show who kind of roped women in and got them, brainwashed. Am I right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
But the thing that really struck me was that because they brought on experts about cults and whatnot, and talked about the psychology behind it.
Yeah.
And just how easy it would be to get roped into something like that. And just and which as I was watching, I couldn't help but draw comparisons to Trumpism, and just how it's we like to say, okay, these Republicans are stupid and whatnot. But it's no, there is a psychological element of these people are being manipulated. And that, basically the Republican Party sort of turned into a death cult, basically.
In the back of my head, I am thinking that we're probably going to spend more time on this stuff when we get to the other side of the COVID relief bill, when there's not going to be as much happening legislatively. Things are going to slow down. I mean, this is the thing, this is an aside, but just the nature of what we do here is going to change because of the pace of that existed during the Trump administration. It's going to be different. I think we're going to probably get into some of these questions as to what really, what's going on with folks like that. A lot of it, and I'm still working on Bob Altemeyer, who has done, did some research into right-wing authoritarianism, and but also QAnon and stuff like that. Appreciate the phone call.
But yeah,
thank you for your time.
And just to add, I just recently rewatched Going Clear, the Scientology documentary, just because I was thinking a lot about cult mentality. And just to add to what Sam said, if anyone hasn't seen that too, that's another great window into the mind of what happens to people when they get so
Keith Raniere, who founded Nexium, the main guy behind it, also got his start in some multi-level marketing schemes from the 90s.
I feel like I've heard about this. I got to watch that documentary. But it reminds me, I got an email the other day about our talk about Q, and from a listener, and I do not have their name here, and I can't read the whole thing because it's really long. But and I believe it was a she. What she was arguing was that she seen dozens of people in her life get radicalized into Q due to the pandemic. They were not Republicans to start. They didn't identify as Christian These were progressive Bernie campaigning urbanites with advanced degrees, no fear of modernity, no underlying misogyny. In fact, a woman I know who taught an excellent workshop here in Chicago on feminist empowerment is now a campaign manager for one of the candidates in the Arizona Patriots Party.
Wow.
And apparently she had IM'd the show, but she said there's nowhere near a one-to-one correlation between Q and your typical bigoted conservative Christianity. The common denominator among those I know that were radicalized New Age spirituality.
Yeah, there's a thread of that too.
The New Age community, as it exists in 21st century American phenomena, has a lot of issues that make it inherently fascistic. Preoccupation with the body and the earth, with the pure and organic, with innovative ways of reconstructing morality. I believe these ideological stances predispose this community to falling prey to the Q stuff, along with a general embrace of counterculture. They feel they are participating in something transgressive, which is much the way they viewed their lifestyle pre-pandemic. This is a fascinating theory. I would be curious.
This rings true to me. Like, I have a friend from college and a friend's sister who are the two people I know who are sort of Q adjacent, and that's their background, is that New Age stuff.
Yeah, and I have a great aunt, and somebody I know too, older person, and it's like, and also I think it trends a little bit more boomer generation.
I think so, because I definitely know some libertarian hippie type folks who are into, at the margins of this type of, who were Trump voters in some instances. And there was a sort of a counterculture quality to it. She writes, one of the million reasons I'm devastated by Michael's death is that I know he would have been able to see this movement clearly based on his proximity to the New Age culture. Many on the left ridicule holistic and New Age culture as pseudoscience, which is exactly the type of attitude that makes leftism and liberalism distasteful to the New Age types who've been fully radicalized. And certainly there are, who
would be more, I think, inclined to be on the left if it weren't for, I think, Michael did talk about that a lot. And I thought it was a pretty profound point, because like the whole Bill Maher atheism and like the sneering, very off-putting and like often very insular and just self-congratulatory.
There's more to this too, though, because she says, bear in mind how utterly devastated people like holistic body workers, massage therapists, etc., are by the pandemic. Our jobs are completely not possible unless we decide to not believe that the pandemic is real, which unfortunately is the track I've seen many taking. Across spring, summer, this is, she talks about her personal experience in
that's fascinating.
I'm going to look into this because I'm really interested in this topic.
And I'm really interested in this NXIVM documentary. I just tried to Google it, and I'm going to open the chat now. If people could post which one it is, because there are apparently multiple, and I don't want to waste my time on the shittier one. So which one is the one that people are talking about? There's an HBO one called The Vow, and then there's a Stars one.
I watched The Vow. It's kind of good. Not really, though, I would say. It becomes about a drama of those people leaving the cult more than why the cult was effective in its own way. It's made by the people who left it, who worked in Hollywood.
Okay. All right. Well, then that's a little less interesting to me now.
Militant to apathy. Bobby Kennedy makes me think he might be Q adjacent. I have no reason to believe that. But the other stuff. Please clip that New Age clip. So interesting. Stephan Aris, as a yoga teacher, I can confirm Q has infected the wellness community in mommy blogs. It's fascinating. 8 Cheese. Definition of modernity is the quality of being modern. Get a helpful pronunciation guide. You just got to do it, please.
It's not going to help.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Also, it's a part of your brand.
If people are concerned about my pronunciation at this point,
language is about communicating.
I mean, look, I know I can understand people having a beef with it, but it's like, I get some very bad news about my desire or capacity to change in that area. And certainly, I'm not going to, I don't have time right now to do Zoom language or speech therapy classes. So you're going to have to just make a decision. Are you going to put up with it or not? Dim Tool, Bitcoin is stupid. How do I stop smoking weed so much? New Wrangler, Sam, there's a movement called Force the Sub, where people are threatening to withhold their YouTube subscription as a gamble to force you to get a sub button on Twitch. I think that could work. Space Possum, doubling the IRS's budget could have outside benefits, amplify other parallel progressive gains while beginning a real attack on the oligarchy. Every dollar you spend on the IRS gets you about $4 or $5 back. Well, just in terms of like just paying for itself. Never mind all the benefits that could happen in terms of theoretically in terms of wealth inequality, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, Cheney from Florida. By the way, if you read this, my name is pronounced Cheney, not Cheyenne. Okay. Beat the Reaper. Conviction depends on 2/3 of the senators being present. So if 20 don't show up for the verdict vote, then Trump is convicted, and those 20 don't have to vote against him. Interesting. Pro-Life Spider. As a podcast-only user, that probably would never see that clip. I opened YouTube app just for this. Thanks. Will from Washington. Look up Jonathan Fassett impeachment. He was a Vermont Assembly member impeached and convicted in 1787, just before the Constitution was written, after leaving office. Also, Virginia conducted preliminary impeachment hearings for Thomas Jefferson in 1781. His term as governor had already ended. All right, 3 more of these bad boys. Amy Jean from SD. Emma, watch the Stars doc. One of the slaves of Keith participated in coercive control was the focus. Shane from Canada.
Thank you.
I was going to call on his right-wing Mandela to talk about libertarianism and pivot to making fun of how you say no me Key's name, but practice saying your name wrong so often I now have a mental block. Welcome to my world. Nikki in Astoria. Romney is from Michigan, but went to BYU. And the final, yes, of course, his dad was George Romney, governor of Michigan, and also president of American Motors. Final I am of the day, Brock from VA. So Epstein's lawyer is literally representing Trump, and cute people still think Trump is stopping a pedo cabal. Emma's going on vacation.
It's my last day until Tuesday. I'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Emma will be holding down the fort solo starting Tuesday next week for a couple of days because I will be going on vacation.
Please be kind. I'm going to be figuring out the technology and everything and how to host as I go. So,
see you. I will see you tomorrow. I will see you like in a week and a half.
Yikes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth